Let's start with a mathematical impossibility. If you look at the raw data of global military power today, what is happening in the Middle East right now should not be possible. Consider the numbers. Russia has the world's largest nuclear arsenal, with over 5,000 warheads and a defense budget of $145 billion. China has a standing army of over 2 million active personnel and an actual defense budget approaching $400 billion. These are two great challenges to the Western order. They are nuclear superpowers. They possess the material wealth, the industrial capacity, and the sheer demographic weight to dictate terms to the world. And yet it is not Russia or China that has forced the United States military to fundamentally rewrite its doctrine. It is Iran, a nation with a fraction of their GDP, a nation with zero nuclear weapons, a nation that has been under the most severe economic sanctions in modern history. How did a country with an economy 62 times smaller than the combined might of Russia and China stand against the absolute peak of Western military technology and hold its ground? Why did a multi-billion-dollar American aircraft carrier retreat from the Persian Gulf, turning off its GPS to hide from a nation that supposedly lacks superpower status? The answer is something that military academics in Washington, Moscow, and Beijing are struggling to understand. They are trying to measure this conflict using the old metrics of power, counting fighter jets, comparing the defense budgets, and analyzing radar system. But they are missing the entire picture. They are watching a nation that has discovered the elixir of true power. And today we are going to explain exactly why the leadership in Russia and China watches Iran not just with respect, but with absolute envy. To understand what is happening, we must first recognize the very definition of power has changed. For the last century, the global order was built on a materialistic narrative. And this narrative, power was measured purely by steel and dollars. If you had the biggest aircraft carrier, the most advanced F-35 fighter jets, and the deepest pockets, you owned the world. This was psychological fortress that West built around the minds of the global population. They convinced the world that resistance was mathematically futile. They wanted you to look at their defense budget and simply give up before the fight even started. But here's what they did not tell you. That psychological fortress was built on a foundation of sand. And Iran shattered that fortress. They did it by rendering the aircraft carrier obsolete. When the United States deployed its naval fleets to the region, it was supposed to end the conversation. Instead, the fleets arrived, circled, and ultimately retreated. This was not just a tactical withdrawal. This was the collapse of a military doctrine. The aircraft carrier, the ultimate symbol of American imperial reach, was neutralized by a nation utilizing asymmetrical warfare, the strategic use of precise and mass-produced weapons to overwhelm sophisticated, expensive defense systems. When a $20,000 drone can bypass or exhaust a defense system that costs millions of dollars per interception, the material equation breaks down. The United States found itself spending billions of dollars in a matter of weeks just to maintain a defensive posture. The math no longer worked. But this technological asymmetry is only the surface level. It is symptom, not the cause. If the technology were the only factor, Russia and China could easily replicate this model. They have the engineering, they have the factories, they have the resources. Yet they cannot replicate what Iran has done. Because the true source of Iran's power is not material, it is spiritual. In the strategic framework of the resistance axis, there is a concept known as the elixir. the transformative element that turns ordinary metals into an unstoppable force. That elixir is the power of faith. Material capability alone is dead. A missile is just a tube of fuel and explosives. What gives it true power is the ideology cohesion and the popular willingness to sacrifice that stands behind it. Look at the contrast. When Russia engaged in its conflict in Ukraine, despite its overwhelming material superiority, it faced immediate internal crisis. Reports of plummeting morale, soldiers refusing to fight, and a reliance on paid contractors highlighted a profound ideological vacuum. The Russian state has immense power, but it struggles to mobilize the soul of its population. There is no transcendent narrative driving the average citizen to endure hardship for the state. They are fighting for a flag and a paycheck, not a divine mandate. China faces a similar dilemma. It has built an economic miracle and a formidable military machine, but its cohesion is largely dependent on the continued economic growth and a highly managed internal security apparatus. If the economic engine falters, the loyalty of the population is untested and the fires of the true existential struggle. But this is where the story takes a turn that Western analysts simply cannot process. Look at Iran. During the heat of the recent military tensions, when the threat of direct bombardment by the United States and Israel was at its peak, the population did not flee. They did not turn against the state. Instead, millions took to the streets. Their fervor increased under the threat of fire. Strategists within the divine narrative refer to this phenomenon as the descent of divine tranquility, or they call it the Sakina. It is the calm resolve that settles over a population united by a higher purpose. The people are not viewed as mere instrument of the state. They are the very engine of the movement. This level of popular mobilization cannot be bought with defense budgets. It cannot be engineered in a laboratory. It must be born from a deeply rooted, transcendent ideology. Russia and China watched this and realized a terrifying truth about their own vulnerabilities. They have weapons, but they do not have sakina. They do not have a population that will willingly absorb economic devastation and military threat for decades without breaking. This spiritual power manifests most clearly in the structure of leadership. Western analysts often claim that the charismatic leadership is the historical accident. It happens once in a generation, and when that leader dies, the system usually collapses. Russia's entire geopolitical strategy is currently tied to the personal will and authority of Vladimir Putin. He has no clear designated successor. The system is designed around him, and there is a deep anxiety about what happens the day he is no longer there. China faces the exact same crisis. Xi Jinping has centralized power to an unprecedented degree, breaking the establishment norms of the succession. The future of Chinese system is heavily dependent on one man. But Iran has achieved something that defies Western political science. They systematized charismatic, ideologically driven leadership. The transition from founder of the Republic Ayatollah Khomeini to Ayatollah Khamenei was a moment the West believed would tear a country apart. Instead, the transition was seamless. The ideological line held. This is the concept of wilayat, which is the guardianship and unbroken chain of divinely guided leadership. It ensures that the system is not dependent on the ego of one man, but on a continuous ideological framework. The enemy can target individuals, they can assassinate commanders, but they cannot assassinate a framework. When you kill a military commander who is fighting for a paycheck, his unit collapses. When you assassinate a commander who is fighting for a divine narrative, His sacrifice has strengthened the resolve of the next generation. His legacy deepens the ideological commitment. You cannot bomb an ideology out of existence. To truly understand this, we must look backward. The events unfolding today are not unprecedented. They are the repetition of a pattern that was established over 1,000 years ago. Think back to the Battle of Trench or the Battle of Ahzab. The early Muslim community in Medina was surrounded by a massive, overwhelming coalition of enemy forces. The enemy had superior numbers, superior wealth, and superior weaponry. By the every metric of the materialistic logic, the Muslims should have been annihilated. The psychological pressure was immense. But what happened? The community did not break. They relied on a strategic innovation, digging in the trench, but more importantly, they relied on their ideological cohesion. Their faith did not wane when they saw the size of the enemy army. Instead, it solidified their resolves. Today, the resistance axis is facing its own battle of Ahzab. The coalition of Western military power and the regional proxies appears overwhelming on paper. But just like the coalition of the past, this modern coalition is held together only by material interests. It lacks the spiritual core required to sustain a prolonged existential conflict. We are witnessing a fundamental shift in the global order. It is a shift from unipolar world dominated by material wealth to a multipolar world where spiritual resilience dictates the outcome of conflicts. The United States, with all its wealth, is discovering that it cannot buy victory. Russia and China, with all their military might, are realizing that without ideological cohesion, their power is brittle. Iran has proven that the divine sunnah, the unchanging, unbreakable laws of history that dictates how empire falls, still apply. When a population is united by faith, when they refuse to be intimidated by the illusion of material superiority, and when they are guided by a coherent ideological framework, they become unbreakable. They have redefined what it means to be a superpower. And that is why in the halls of power in Moscow and Beijing, they are studying the Iranian model. They have the seal, they have the dollars, but they know deep down that they are missing the elixir. This is just one piece of psychological collapse of the materialist order. To see the full 400-year playbook they are using to dismantle the empire, click this video here, and I'll see you in that video.